Welcome to week 3 of the spirituality of leadership. Hopefully, you've been with us throughout this journey. We're really excited as we dive deep into this week, which is going to be a shift in the conversation, but we'll tie everything together regarding the spirituality of leadership and its importance for the joining us via Zoom. The workbook is provided in the chat. You can download it. For those joining us on Facebook Live, I put it underneath the video. Just go to the website, log in, and the workbook will be sent to you. As you join us, please mute yourself. At the end, I'll open up opportunities to ask questions and formulate some dialogue over this topic. This week is going to be a game changer. I believe this is something that is going to resonate with everyone here today. And so let's just dive right in. So a few weeks ago, when we first started, computer. There you go. This is week 3. As we talk about the spirituality of leadership, this is going to hopefully put some things into perspective. When we first started this journey, we talked about how lead from their gifts and their talents, but also from their broken places. Leaders lead from their gifts and talents, but they also lead from their broken places. Leadership really starts from within an individual and then it goes outward. We talked about the spirit, soul, and body, meaning that the whole work of these last 3 weeks is to position us for a conversation about probably the hardest work in leadership, which is not necessarily leading, but understanding that we're all humanly flawed. We have our issues and problems, but the more we focus on the inward or unseen places in our lives, we're able to lead more efficiently and effectively because we lead from within ourselves and then it proceeds outward. So we lead from within. We make decisions, we formulate ideas, thought processes, etc., from the inward place. The hard work of leadership and the spirituality of leadership is taking a conversation or taking a look at the inward places. As we correct the inward places, we're able to lead more efficiently and more effectively. We spent last week talking about giving an example of a person that's maybe dealing with rejection and how that impacts their ability to lead, or a person that deals with low self-esteem and how it impacts their ability to lead. For those of us who have titles as leaders, it doesn't really matter if it's a title leader, your regular 9 to 5. It's also everything that I'm covering is very applicable to every role of leadership that you play in your family, as a parent, as a spouse. It impacts if you are in the church, and you don't even have to be the pastor. It's just that if you have responsibilities in which you are in charge over, how you lead starts from within and it proceeds outward. It determines the decisions that you make. It determines how you deal with certain situations. It determines how you address the environment or the situations in your life. The change doesn't necessarily happen instantaneously. However, the more that you deal with the inward work and the broken places in your life and those things that only you and God know, the better you are as a leader. Okay. So I use the analogy every week about it's hard to lead people up a mountain if you're afraid of heights. The last 4 weeks have really been hopefully guiding you to think about not the mountain in particular, but dealing with the fear that will prevent you from leading others up the mountain. So if you have to go up the mountain, it's very hard to take the people with you who are following your lead or following your example if you are afraid of heights. The goal of all of this the last 4 weeks is for us to share light on the part of you that is afraid, or the part of you that makes you fearful of the things that you need to do so that you can lead others more effectively. How to lead a family, how to lead your team, how do you lead your organization? How do you deal with the inward places in your life so that you're able to lead more efficiently and more effectively? Okay. So that is the whole goal of this training. What is leadership? What is leadership? Or does it mean to lead? If you have the workbook, the first page open, and before we even get into reading one, I want to give you what I consider to be a working definition of leadership and how we make it applicable to the spirituality of leadership. So, defining leadership, the role of a leader is to establish or execute rules, policies, and strategies that define a clear vision, guiding a group towards a shared goal or an objective. Effective leadership is about providing direction, leading by example, making informed decisions, fostering collaborations, and building consensus to achieve a common purpose. Our ultimate goal is to establish and execute rules, to have policies and strategies that define a clear vision, to guide people who are following us. If you are a leader of a department, your job is to execute the rules and policies of the organization in such a way that it defines a clear vision for that organization so that people are able to follow you as you provide clear vision. The same applies to your family, your home, your children. And even though it sounds like a whole bunch of corporate lingo, it's really not. Your role as a leader is to develop and establish these policies and these rules and the interpretations of these policies and these rules so that there is a clear vision. From a practical perspective, and let's just get beyond corporate America and use something that we all deal with, right? If you're a parent, if you're a spouse, right? Let's just deal with that. So, as a parent, it is critically important that you have established rules and policies and expectations for your children, right? Why? Because it sets a clear vision. For example, if education is a part of the clear vision of your home, you have expectations, you set forth home policies, the rules and expectations as it relates to academia or schoolwork and how they're supposed to act in school. You set all of these things in place so that for your children, for your household, for your home, there are clear expectations. Each of us have families, we've had parents, good or bad, but those families set forth some level of expectations and rules. Whether or not those rules were good or bad, that's not necessarily the judgment call we'll have today, but we understand the rules and expectations were there. Now, written or unseen, rules and expectations were there. You knew what you could and could not do, right? A leader's goal is to set forth these expectations. That is the whole role of what a leader is supposed to do. Understand we are all broken people. We all have issues in our lives that we have to fix, and we all have things we are working towards fixing. That's why spirituality and leadership are so vital and so important. Even though we grew up with rules and expectations, some written and some unintentional, these expectations were created in the way we grew up. We take those things and our interpretation of them, and we make our decisions based on this interpretation. Now, stick with me because it's going to make sense as I proceed. Let me say this again. We're broken people. We all have issues and things we are working towards fixing. There's no perfect person other than Jesus, right? We're all works in progress. We're all trying to aspire to be the best version of ourselves. We lead from our gifts and talents, the things that are easy for us, but we also lead from the broken places, the unseen thing. As a leader, as you are executing rules and strategies to create a clear vision for your house, your home, your family, your department, your school, your organization, wherever it is, you're going to thrive in the areas of your life where your gifts and talents are, but you're also going to not thrive in the areas of your life in which they're broken. And the ultimate goal is for us to get to the point where we work on our broken places so that we become a more efficient and more effective leader. Now, that is the role of a leader. But the functionality of a leader is also composite of how we do it. So how we lead and how we function as a leader comes from the other elements underneath me. So our role is to establish and execute policies and strategies. The way that we do that is through effective communication. The way that we do that is through inspiring motivation. The way we do that is through delegation of tasks. The way we do that is having informed decision making. The way we do that is by resolving conflicts. The way that we do that is by building teamwork, some shared sense of trust, collaboration, mutual respect. The way we do that is we help people navigate those changes. So we lead, but we do that through these functions. Okay. So I want to talk to you about what I consider to be a leadership sandwich. All of us have had some experience with making some type of sandwich. Today, I'm going to use the analogy of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but I'm going to put a little twist on it. Okay. So this is Ezekiel bread. For those who are I don't know, health kick journey, etc. I'm not a big bread eater. Yes, every so often I'll eat a regular sandwich that has, the white bread and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if I say, okay, I'm going to eat bread in particular, and we're making a sandwich in particular, Ezekiel bread is a flourless bread. It doesn't have flour, it's a whole bunch of grain. Now, if you're a person that's on their health kick and you're starting New Year's resolution, the likelihood that you're to try your bread, um, you probably will try it. If you ever had it, if you've had traditional bread, Wonder Loaf or whatever, Ezekiel bread does not taste like any of it at all. It is healthy. It's like eating dirt. Okay, let me say that if you want to compare the two, it's like eating dirt. Okay. It's not going to give you the warm fuzzies. Yes, over time you'll get accustomed to liking it or whatever. But when it comes to comparing Ezekiel bread to Wonder Bread, if you've had them both, if you grew up on Wonder Bread, if you grew up on bread that looked like it was wheat, but it really wasn't wheat, Ezekiel bread will throw you for a loop. It's not one of those childhood favorites. If you gave it to your child and say, hey, I'm gonna eat Ezekiel bread for lunch, it's not something that you would like. But I'm gonna use this as an analogy. So leadership is a sandwich, right? Leadership are the functions of leadership, or the body of work of a leadership is the full sandwich. So if I'm making peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? So I have peanut butter, I have jelly, I have two pieces of bread, and I put it together. That is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That is leadership, right? Now, while it's common, that's how you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The ingredients of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich can be different. All peanut butter is not the same peanut butter. If I'm making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich out of Ezekiel bread, the ingredients of the bread is completely different, right? There are the composites of this Ezekiel bread is completely different than what makes up Wonder Bread. Even though we put it in the category of bread or a type of flourless bread, it's not the same ingredients of Ezekiel bread as Wonder Bread. Follow with me because this is going to make sense. So you have this body of work that we call leadership, and we went over my definition of leadership, and we briefly covered the functionalities of leadership. That is the sandwich, or the complete sandwich of what leadership is. The ingredients of leadership deals with the individual things that make up the bread. So leadership is a body of work. The ingredients are how we process it. Those are the functions, right? So I don't want to twist it because I said it wrong. So Leadership is the sandwich. The ingredients of all the things that make up all the things that make up the sandwich are the ingredients. Those are the goals, the communication, the motivation, the strategies. Those are the functions of leadership. Now, the difference between Ezekiel bread or another type of bread has to deal with quality control. The quality control. If you go shopping for any type of bread, you'll typically find that the better quality the bread is, the more expensive it becomes. Follow me. The better quality of the bread tends to be more expensive. It will be more expensive because quality costs more. Okay? So if I'm making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, if I'm using Ezekiel bread, in comparison to regular bread, is double the cost of a Wonder Loaf or triple the cost of a Wonder Loaf. The ingredients are clear. The quality of the bread is clear. The taste is different because the taste is based upon a different quality measure. Okay? So, so when you put the sandwich together using the different ingredients, leadership, how you put the different qualities together or the different ingredients together determines the output of the leadership. Now, that is a great example of the spirituality of leadership. And here's why. We all function in the body of leadership, regardless of what we do. The quality of how we function determines the ingredients that we put, but the quality of those ingredients is based upon the unseen thing, which is the spirit of leadership. So, for an example, when you look at what it takes just to make bread, you'll determine that the quality typically is really spelled out what the quality of products are. We look at the ingredients of what it takes to make bread, right? The more ingredients you have, typically diminish the amount of quality of the product, meaning that you're getting sub properties of that product, right? So enriched flour is not true flour. It has been rich. It's been broken down. Chemicals have been added to it. It has been diluted, right? So that the more cheaper product that you put into the quality of it determines the output or determines the ingredients of that, which is going to impact the quality of the leadership that you have in the end. So the whole goal of spiritual leadership is let's deal with the quality control. And the quality control in leadership is your values, your core, your character, your ideologies, all the little things that are in the secret place determines the ingredients of what you're concocting, which in turn creates the body of work that we call leadership. Goes back to the concept that we talked about week 1, spirit, soul, and body. The spirit of leadership is the unseen things. It's the things that we don't know. It's between the individual, God, themselves. It's the things that we don't know, because all of us can put on a great show. We can act like we are a leader, but at the end of the day, what ends up determining over the long period of time goes back to the quality control, which is the spirit. If I have a trouble in the spirit area of my life, rejection, bitterness, hate, bigotry, racism, whatever, if a person has that in their spirit, even though they compile the sandwich are the ingredients of what it means. They're functioning in goals and strategies, they're communicating, but in the root of the spirit part of them is broken and it's not fixed, then the output of the leadership is going to be flawed. The output is of the leadership is going to be flawed. So when you talk about leadership or the spirituality of leadership, it's if we fix the unseen places, if we fix the broken places, if we fix the things that no one else sees, our ingredients become pure, become more valuable, how we function, our roles become very clear, and then we're able to implement, which is the body of our work, leadership more efficiently and more effectively. Okay? And the reason why this is important is because if you study leadership, most leadership trainings all exist. They focus on the physiological or the psychology of the work that leaders do, not necessarily on the inward work of those who lead. We can throw out, um, a collaborative leader or a um, servant leader. We throw out all of these ideas of how the leaders should function, but we don't really spend enough time dealing with the inward work of the leader who has to lead. Okay. And the reason why this is important is because we all lead from an unseen place. We all lead, good or bad, from an unseen place. And that is why this whole training started, is that we all lead from an unseen place. And if we're able to start dealing with the unseen things in our life, the better off we are as a leader. The better off we function in our role as a leader. And if we don't deal with the unseen places, over time, it will manifest itself. So this is an awesome week because I'm going to give you your first assignment and to show you at a high level of the spirituality of leadership, because there is no leadership without us understanding the spirit behind the leader. Once again, we're all broken people. We all have things in our life that we're working towards, but we lead from a place that is unseen, and it manifests itself in the seen. And so this week, you have your first kind of assignment, and I want you to challenge me on this, right? Next week, I want you to challenge me. We live in a democracy. And every 2 to 4 years, we have an election. Now, let me say this before. I don't want people to go down a rabbit hole. I'm just using this as an example and as a homework assignment for you to think about, to experience, and to look at it from a different perspective, from a spirituality of leadership. Okay? We live in a democracy. And the tricky thing about democracy is that as a collective good in our rights as citizens, we have the ability to vote for a leader. We have the ability to vote for a leader. Not only, but when you talk about the spirituality of a leadership, we're not necessarily just voting for a leader or for a policy. There is a part of leadership in which a person leads from an unseen place, from their spirit, their interpretation of laws policies, etc., comes from an inward place. Most people think that you're going and you're voting for one party or another, and you're voting for a platform. You're not necessarily voting just for a platform. You're voting in, or you're making a selection or a choice that is directly connected to a leader and the spirit that we don't know, that we don't see in a leader behind the scenes, in the unseen realm, in the unseen places. So your homework assignment is, we know that on Monday, the United States is going to have the inauguration of a new president. Now, what does the word inauguration mean? Inauguration means the beginning of something new. On Monday, the United States, whether or not you voted for or against a political candidate, this is not about political party. You're going to see two things that's going to happen on Monday. A couple of things is going to happen, but I want you to take off lenses of a natural. Oh, we're just voting for a president, or you're just a president. The president doesn't impact you as an individual. People who say it's a lie, it's not true. Whoever we vote for as a leader and whoever is in leadership does have an impact on your life. Good or bad or indifferent, they have an impact. So on Monday, the American people have spoken and we have voted for a leader or a series of leaders. In those leaders that we have voted for, we are also voting for the spirituality or the spirit of those leaders who we have voted for. We have made a choice, or the collective body of the United States has made a choice on who they're going to pick as leader. This is not a judgment call, but I want those who are with me for the next couple of weeks, I want you to look at it through a different lens. You didn't vote for just a person. You didn't just vote for policies. You voted for a person, because if you look at the definition of leadership, there are to establish and execute rules. Establish and execute rules. But we know that those interpretations, because we're going to get into another thing this week that's going to be amazing, but we voted for a candidate, and that candidate is going to be inaugurated, meaning the beginning of something new. In our country, we call it the transfer of power. We call it the transfer of power. So on Monday, there's a series of things that's going to happen. Number one, you're going to see through a ceremony the transfer of power from one spirit to another spirit. You're going to see the transfer of power from one spirit to another spirit. Those who have feelings about whatever, you're going to see people who are going to celebrate, and you're going to see people who are going to grieve. There are people who don't agree with a person or individual, and it's not necessarily just with policy. It could be the secret things about how they feel about a person, or how they feel about the candidate, or how they feel about their character, their integrity. You're going to see celebration and you're going to see grievance, right? But what will happen, and for those who are on here, what my challenge is to see or take a minute from a more deeper look and see how there is going to be a shift in culture, climate, and unseen things, just as the United States makes a shift from one leader to the next, right? From one leader to the next. We call it the transfer of power. If you have been out in the community, you may hear snippets about people who are concerned and people who are happy. But what America does through democracy is that we choose which spirit in which we want to lead us by the collective vote. And what we do as a country, we spiritually shift from one spirit of leadership to another spirit of leadership. So I want you to look at the inauguration a little bit different. Don't look at, oh, we just have one president coming in. Watch how, or spend time looking at changes in conversations, what changes in people's perspective, what changes in people who feel a certain kind of way about leadership, and what happens from a more inward look about the systematic transformation of power, or the systematic transference of spiritual leadership from one spiritual leader, or not one spiritual leader, from one leader to another, and how it impacts the dialogue of the country. And understand that even from a governmental perspective, who leads determines the unseen thing that we can't necessarily put our finger on, right? Well, we can't necessarily put our finger on, but we know that there's a shift in power. We understand there's a shift in what we were yesterday will be completely different, and what we will be on Tuesday after the shift of power. Think about it. When presidents say on day one, right? As soon as the inauguration, I'm going to implement things that will shift where we were yesterday to where we will be at today. So that's your first homework assignment. Watch, or take a moment to step back and don't look at it one way, but look at it as the United States shifting from one spirit of one leader to another, shift to the spirit of another leader. And then what happens after that? How is the ingredients change? How does the taste of the sandwich changes based upon one shift to another? I mean, you can even think about it in your own life in particular, right? Have you ever worked for a department and all of a sudden the manager or your department lead changes? And when that manager shifts, and you know that your manager is transitioning out and a new manager is transitioning in, is there a level of uncertainty? Now, the policy stays the same. There hasn't been any change in corporate policies, your time off, your time in, how you clock in, hasn't necessarily changed at that moment. But on the inwardly, you know that there's a shift happening, right? Why is there a shift? Because leadership is spiritual. Leadership is spiritual. It's not just a person. That person embodies an unseen realm within themselves that they bring to the role or the functionality of their leadership. You don't have to change policies. Only thing you have to do is shift leadership, and you will see and you will feel the difference. That's why when you say, oh, there's a change in leadership in our company, there's always a level of uncertainty. And then when that leadership comes in, either there is a connection of that leader with the people that is going to follow them, or there's going to be a disconnect. Anytime there's a disconnect, you'll typically find people quit and resign, and there's a lot of turmoil that's going on. But understand that leadership is more than just a title position. It starts from the inwardly and it works outwardly. So with that the case, I'm going to bring in a new concept this week, and we're going to talk about the spirit of the law. So we talked about your first homework assignment. Look at the inauguration a little bit differently, from more of a spiritual lens, more from an inward work, than not necessarily just this happens every 4 years. Look at the fact that those who lead us lead from their gifts and talents, but they also lead from their broken places, right? They also lead from their broken places. And if they're not working at fixing their broken places, then there will always be this level of brokenness in their leadership ability. No judgment call, but understand that leadership is spiritual. So we're going to talk about the spirit of the law. And I'm going to give you a good example of the spirit of the law. And it's going to talk, and we're going to use this as a starting point. So growing up as a kid, history class, we have, and let me just deal with the definition of the spirit of the law. So the spirit of the law refers to the intent, value, and purpose behind rules or principles, focusing on fairness, wisdom, and compassion. But I'm going to use the first part of that to drive this point home. The spirit of the law refers to the intent, values, and purpose behind a rule or principle. What is the intent or the value that goes behind a rule or value? Okay. So the spirit of the law, so we have what we call the written law. Those are the words that are written. We read it, right? We read the law. Okay. But behind the written law that we write, there's a spirit that goes behind it. And that spirit is the interpretation of the values and the intent behind that law. Okay. And when you stick with me on that, it's the intent or the purpose that's behind that law or the interpretation behind that law. So I'm going to give you this as an example. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When you read this, this is a part of our Declaration of Independence in the United States that we, the founding fathers, put together, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. That among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our founding fathers created this as far as our Declaration of Independence. Now, just this one line. When you talk about the spirit of the law has to deal with the unseen things that was written. The unseen things that comes with the writing of the law or the interpretation of the law. So for an example, the biggest thing that we've had to deal with in the United States, let's just break this one thing down as a form of written law versus the spirit of the law. The written law, we see it in writing. You can look it up. It's the Declaration of Independence. But when you talk about the spirit of the law, you're talking about the unseen things that existed in the interpretation of what this law means. One of our biggest struggles in the United States is that we have been trying to fix or to salvage the spirit that the spirit that was written, or the spirit that was behind the writings of these words. So all men were created equal. Think about women's rights. It was hundreds of years later where women got the right to vote. It was hundreds of years later where Black people got the right to vote. We are still fighting with equal rights in this country. We're still working towards having life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Why? Because the original writers, in their spirit, they never thought that women, Black people, should have equal rights. They were not considered in their heart and their spirit that there were an issue when they wrote the law, because in their spirit, they never saw women as being equal. That's the spirit of the law. It's written law. It's written. They literally meant men. They didn't mean human or humanity. They had laws like the 3/5 compromise, right? So they never intended for this, Their interpretation of this line wasn't interpreted for people of color or women, etc. It was for white men at the time, because that spirit or their interpretation from the unseen places, because we weren't there. Hopefully, we weren't there when they wrote this at the time. If you are, you should be in the Guinness Book of World Records. We weren't there, but hundreds of years later, we're still dealing with the aftermath of the spirit that wrote the law or wrote these words hundreds of years ago. We're still debating on that. When people use it, they use these conversations. We go back to try to justify or to fix the spirit of the individuals who originally wrote these words. Spirit of the law. You can have all the words, but unless the person's spirit agrees with what they even put in writing, it doesn't really matter, because their interpretation comes from the unseen place. We weren't there when they wrote this, but we understand over time what they truly meant, the manifestation of what they truly meant, the manifestation of what they truly were, the manifestation of their original intentions, the manifestation of what they really truly meant when they wrote these words. So when you talk about the spirit of the law, you're talking about the intent, the values, the purpose behind rules and principles. And this is just the Declaration of Independence. And now, you're hearing, as there's a shift in power, there's a lot of conversations about DEI, right? Diversity and inclusion, or what that means, and the dismantling of what that means, and all these other policies that are written in law. The interpretation will always be based upon the spirit of the leader. The spirit of the leader. So one of the things that we must understand as leaders, and how powerful the spiritual work of a leader is really goes far deeper. It goes into the spiritual interpretation of the law, or the spiritual interpretation of the written law. For an example, and here's here's a great example. So we've talked about government, or we talk about like politics, and we talk about the Declaration of Independence. But let's just bring it all home, right? Let's bring it on to something that we can control, right? The question of the spirit of the law has to deal with the inward work. If leadership is spiritual, and the purpose of leadership is to execute and develop policies and rules to help govern and move people with consensus and beliefs, and etc., and so forth. If our interpretation is based upon the inward work, think about your core beliefs as a person, individually, and even how you lead your home. Where did those core beliefs come from? Right? Think about it. There are people, I remember growing up as, not growing up as a kid, not necessarily, it wasn't my growing up as far as my parents. But there is a cultural belief in certain cultures that kids are to be seen and not heard, right? Old school parents back in the day, kids are to be seen, not heard. Where did that come from? Where did that come from? Where kids are to be seen and not heard? What is the interpretation of that? Do children not have opinions or voices, or can children not articulate their feelings and their emotions, and does children not understand right from wrong? or they're just supposed to be seen. And then when they turn 18 or 19, now you can be seen and heard when you are an adult. Where did that come from? Where is the root of that philosophy, those theories? Where did that core belief come from? Where did it come from? We say it to kids. We treat kids a certain kind of way. It depends upon the family that you exist in. If that's a core belief and kids are seen and not heard, what does that look like? How you raise your children, right? What does that look like? Because our interpretation of that could mean multiple things. For an example, research will tell you that literacy of a child, their ability to thrive in education, starts from the detailed conversations that parents have with their children, right? So you'll typically find students that have high IQs or thrive for learning. When a kid's inquisitive as a kid and they're going to grocery stores and they say, "Hey, mommy, daddy, what's this?" Don't take that. Slap the hand and go on. Well, you've already taught them in an unseen rule, because you may have been raised the same way. You got to figure out where it comes from. That when a kid asks a question, don't touch that, snap their hands. You're training them not to inquire any information beyond what is seen and right in front of them. So now they develop this core belief that asking questions is not good. Don't touch. And I immediately get scolded by asking a question, or I don't even provide a detailed answer. That's cereal. Why is it red? Don't know. So now you further don't give them information or acquire information. Now you take that a whole nother level. Another parent, a kid said, "Hey, mommy, what's this?" And they grab it. Mother said, "Oh, that's cereal. Why is it different colors?" Well, there's manufacturing companies that use products that are not good for your body to make it change colors like blue, orange, green. And yeah, it's pretty, but it's not necessarily on a healthy. All those are chemicals. God didn't create a Cheerio to be green, yellow, blue, and purple, and that's not really yada 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 yada. Now, what you're telling that kid is that you're opening the door that, hey, I'm learning about life, everything around me. Now, how does that apply to spirit of the law? Number one, out of our core values, how we were raised, our culture, our climate, our parenting, the environment that we grew up in, helps formulate our core values, good or bad, right or wrong. Your parents, all of our parents did the best they could. All our communities probably did the best they possibly could, dealing with the situation they were dealt. But after that, we formulate these core values, these core beliefs. Things that we interpreted as being true that may necessarily not have been true, but we carry along with us in how we govern, how we formulate rules, how we formulate expectations, how we systematically develop the spirit behind in which we operate, how we function in our roles as being leaders. So if it's broken and we don't even recognize that if that is broken, then what happens is, while we're very gifted and talented in a lot of our areas, we also still lead from those broken places. So the goal is that we fix those broken places. Okay? So leading with the spirit of the law means making decisions that honors our underlying values of integrity, care, even when it requires flexibility or courage. So as we are on this journey, the way that we are able to make our decisions is by our underlying values of integrity and care. So how do we fix that? We fix that by taking a look at what we value and the things in our life that we value that are not fruitful in our lives. When we fix them, we're able to make better decisions that are underlining our core values that truly things that we believe, things that's going to move us forward, things that's going to progress us forward. It allows us to even do it with flexibility and courage. So as we fix our values, we're able to lead with better integrity, we're able to make better decisions, and we're able to do it not only with flexibility, but also with courage. For an example, just take a few moments to imagine a leader enforcing a policy that unintentionally causes harm to people. You work in a company and there's a situation that occurs and there's a policy that's written that is causing harm to people. The written rule, the written law, unintentionally causes harm to people. How do you, as a leader, acting with the spirit of the law, how would you work that? Do you change the policy? Or do you critically think about ways that you can implement the policy at the same time, not unintentionally causing harm to people? Here's a good example. If you, as a leader, from a corporate standpoint, right? The policy is if a person needs to take off, they have to go through all these protocols to take off. Well, before they can take off, they have to go through making all these phone calls, etc. You're working with someone, they get a phone call saying, "Hey, my parent is in a hospital. I have to go see them right now." Now, the rule says you can't leave unless I call HR, fill it out in the time sheet, boom, 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 boom. Hey, you go through a litany of things they have to do before they have to call off. That's the policy. That's the law. They say they're on life support. They only got a few minutes to live, blah, 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 right? That's the policy they have to go through to take off. As a leader, based upon your core values, if family is important, you'll say, "Hey, go ahead and leave. I'll take care of it. Call me if you need anything." Now, did you necessarily break the policy? Hypothetically, yes. But when they're gone, you let HR know such and have to leave. We'll take care of the paperwork tomorrow, but you let them know, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't value people, then your interpretation that means that, yeah, you can go ahead and take them up, but we got to let HR know, and they'll take another 35, 45 minutes to get this cleared out, and it unintentionally harms the individual. So I want you to think, as a leader, is there a policy or something that you have or something that was written or something that you had to navigate that policy to ensure that it doesn't intentional harm to individuals? So I want you to reflect. So think about that as an example. Think about that. And think of a time when you had to prioritize the spirit of the law over the letter of the law. Have you ever had to do that in your own life as a leader, in your family, with your children, where you kind of bypass a certain thing because it does intentional harm? For an example, you could believe in education and you could be a scholar in school, but you understood for that middle child, a C was like a rock star thing. Not because they were anything less than, is that academia wasn't their thing. You still had the expectation of academics, but for them, a C was like an A for the individual who was an honor student, right? Think about those elements. And how did you reflect that value as a leader and what was the outcome? So if in your own personal life, it's department over a team, when did you had to prioritize the spirit of the law over the letter of the law, of the letter of the expectation, and how did it benefit? Or how many are the times that you stood on the letter of the law and it caused major consequences and unintended outcomes that were not favorable? So I want you to reflect on that, think on that for a moment. Okay. Now, are we good with the spirit of the law? Understanding that it comes from a place and our interpretation of that place. And the more that we fix our values, we're able to lead a certain kind of way. All right. So let's shift to section two, the core principles. So we talked about integrity, compassion, service, and vision. Integrity is leading with honesty and consistency and staying true to your values. Compassion is understanding and emphasizing with the needs of others. Service is placing growth over well-being of others above personal gain. And vision is guiding with purpose and inspiring others towards shared goals. So I want you to think real quick. Out of all four of these things, integrity, compassion, service, and vision, which of these principles resonate more with your leadership style? Are you an integrity person? Are you a compassionate person? Are you a service person? Are you a vision person? Okay. Are you a vision person? How does your leadership style identify with this and more? Are you a person with integrity, or do you lead with honesty, consistency, compassion? Are you a service oriented kind of leader? Are you a vision um, leader? So we had, oh my goodness, it is already 11:34. I'm going to spend about 10 minutes and we'll get to this next week. I'm going to just start with integrity real quick. So integrity is about aligning your actions with your values, even when it's difficult. And it's the foundation of trust and credibility in leadership. So one of the things that um, great leaders are, they have a high level of integrity. Now, I asked you earlier, which one resonates with you the most? But I really want to say, let's just start with integrity as being like a key cornerstone. How are you aligning your actions with your values, even when it's difficult? How are you aligning your actions with your values, even when it's difficult? Because it is the foundation of trust and credibility. How do you daily align your actions with your values, even when it's difficult? This week, I want you to think about a time where you upheld integrity in a very challenging situation and how did it affect your leadership and the people around you. Think about a time when you had to live up to your integrity, even when it was difficult, and how did it affect your leadership and the people around you? I want you to just take that one. You can go through the rest of the workbook this week, but I want you to think about integrity because I know it came up last week and I'm going to open up for a couple of questions. Sorry, we're a little longer. Hopefully it's been good. But I want you to just think about integrity. You can do the rest of the workbook and we'll really next week as we close it out because there's really more to this and I have a special surprise next week. But I want you to just think about integrity for think on about a challenging situation that really was an integrity issue with you. And how did that affect your leadership and the people around you? When you either may have caved in your integrity or you maintained your integrity. Think about that this week. Think about the times where you had to face a challenging situation and it affected people around you. I can think of one right now in my head. And my integrity was so overwhelming for me that I had to make a decision. And it impacted people around me. It impacted me personally. It impacted the people that I led. But what I found was I was able to develop better trust and better credibility in my leadership. One of the things that is mentioned that we really have gone away with the last several years is character of leadership. Because when you talk about these other elements of these foundation of core values, integrity and compassion, what we're really talking about is character. Integrity is about what happens when the camera's not on. What is your core belief? What is it that drives you every day? What are the non-negotiables? What makes you who you are? And we often find that you can gain leadership, you can work your way up to get the title without having any of these things. What will end up happening though is that you'll get caught and it'll soon manifest itself as to whatnot. If you are a person of integrity, you should lead with integrity. If you're a person of compassion, you should lead with compassion. Because we're living in an age where authentic leadership is going to become the litmus test for the future. We live in an age where social media, live in an age where we have camera phones, live in an age where everything of who you are and what you are and who you're not can be investigated. It can be viewed under a microscope. It can be observed by others. Integrity, integrity, integrity. So I want you this week to think about integrity. And I want you to identify one area where you can demonstrate more integrity this week. More integrity. It can be integrity with others, but also some of us struggle with having integrity with ourselves. Things that we know we should be doing in the inward work that we're not doing. So think about that this week. I'm going to go off of live and I'm going to spend some time answering questions. Any comments before we get off? Any comments?